Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Humanity as Organism Thrives Convergence Room in Peace Week. And just want to say welcome to everyone within this session, all of you who are attending, and especially welcome to the participants, the panelists, Annie Spade, Viola Olson, and Matt Landry. Tom and I are absolutely thrilled to have you with us. So I will start by introducing Annie. And Annie, you'll just have to give me a second to pull up your bio so that I can do justice to it. So, for everyone who doesn't know Annie Spade, Annie is a Montessori educator who has devoted the last 40 years to helping young children thrive in a mixed-age community. In addition, Annie serves as the 11K member of the Teilhard de Chardin Facebook group as an admin. She's a graduate of Nine Gates Mystery School and a mentor for the Deep Time Network. She's an active member of Gender Equity and Reconciliation International, the Integral Christian Network, and Unity Earth, the organization that is the key sponsoring network for World Unity Week and the 99 Days of Peace through Unity leading up to Peace Week. So welcome, Annie. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Hasina. It's so great to be here, and just want to really extend such a warm welcome to everyone. We hope to have a bit of conversation, even though we only have 50 minutes. We will really keep our comments brief, but hopefully potent, and bring in some other voices here as well. We would really like this to be a conversation. Teilhard has so much to offer us at this time in history, let's say. So just real briefly, just to help kind of set the context for Teilhard in a way, you know, Teilhard was a Jesuit priest and paleontologist. He lived from 1882 and died in New York in 1955. And he was largely unpublished in his life. His scientific work was well respected in the scientific community. He spent decades in China and Southeast Asia and other places in the world excavating and considering our evolutionary history. When I say our, I don't mean just human. He definitely began at the beginning and really developed a perspective on our evolutionary path and the energy of that. And we're really going to talk about that, because it really is not just about a vision at all. I very mindfully chose the word pathway because Teilhard absolutely gives us a way forward, and hopefully we'll kind of inspire one another with that today. So, but Teilhard's work, where he wove mysticism or spirituality in with science, was suppressed, not allowed to be published by the Catholic Church. And so throughout his life, he was unpublished in with that type of work, but he was a prolific writer. He maintained dozens of correspondences in addition to his journals, in addition to dozens and dozens of essays, and at least 2 full books. I know there's a third book that Matt can name out. I've never seen that book actually, but the 2 that he's primarily known for, The Divine Milieu and Phenomenon of Man. Excuse me. So today, from that huge, beautiful pot of work, opus of work, I would like to begin with just a sentence or 2 from an essay that he wrote in 1932. And the title of this essay is The Road of the West. He says, humankind has now reached such a degree of concentration and moral tension that it can no longer postpone taking the spiritual step that will give it a soul. Agnosticism and pluralism are either dead or impotent. It is only a renewed faith in some unity to be born of the world that we can preserve our zest for life. I'll read that last sentence again. It is only a renewed faith in some unity to be born of the world that can preserve our zest for life. When we think about unity, based on our story, let us say in, when I'm speaking from a US viewpoint, having been born and raised here, there's a sense of the melting pot, right? Of just everyone kind of fitting into a mold. It was very much has been a part of our education system, kind of fit in the box or you're out. So there's been that way of imagining a unity, if you will, a kind of unity. And then especially in this essay, because he's contrasting Eastern mysticism, of course, in 1932, and I think there's been a lot of development and cross-pollination between Western and Eastern mysticism now 90 years later, but kind of the classic Eastern asceticism and suppression and annihilation of the personality and the individual was something that he was really considering there in terms of unity. There's a sense of, oh, that would be a way to come together. We just kind of annihilate the uniqueness of one another, and we practice that as a spiritual personal practice as well. But he says, this this is not the energy that brought us here. When he talks about the zest for life in that passage, and he repeats it several times in that essay, he's referring to that essential energy of evolution, which is that we're more ourselves together. We're more ourselves when we come together and co-create together, not by annihilating the uniqueness of one another or of ourselves in coming into that relationship, but by finding our passion, finding our call and our attraction, our allurement, as the deep timers say. So when he calls in that beautiful passage from the epistles in the gospel in the New Testament, where Paul says, in the end, God will be all in all. He's really calling in that all in all, that we are truly integral with all that has been and has brought us here, beginning with the quarks to the atoms, the cells, to we think of our parents, our grandparents, whole organisms, the attraction to one another, the pull to be in relationship is so powerful, and it's something that Teilhard was absolutely committed to and fascinated by and discussed at length in a number of his essays. So finally, before I want to kind of back up just a little bit on on the whole theme that we've chosen here, but I wanted to call in what really inspired me when Hasina reached out to me and said, what would you maybe like to call in for? Peace Week. And it was when Ken Lumpkin, who's a longtime member of our Teilhard Facebook group, posted a quote last week. And in that quote, and I'll give you the final statement, it occurs at the end of a section in Teilhard's book, The Phenomenon of Man, on page 250 in the particular translation that I have. And he's discussing genetics and genetic manipulation. And he did not shy away from scientific inquiry and research. In fact, he said to do research is to adore. And but at the same time, he's calling in at the very end of this section where he's been naming all of that and recognizing all of that. And again, remember, this is before 1955. I don't know exactly when Phenomenon was written, but he's seeing all of this capability is coming. And of course, now we have the internet, which that will be coming out, I'm sure, in our conversation today, the way that he foresaw that as well. So many things with technology and what humanity is capable of creating. I've just called that in, that's a co-creative work. And yet he ends this section, and this was the quote that Kenneth put up in our group. And I invite anyone here that is not a member of our group to come over and answer the questions and join our group page. But he says here, however far science pushes its discovery of the essential fire, and however capable it becomes someday of remodeling and perfecting the human element, it will always find itself in the end facing the same problem. How to give each and every element its final value by grouping them in the unity of an organized whole. So to me, once again, he's calling in the soul of humanity to find our true calling, true voice, and from that place to collaborate and work together, co-create, to come into the convergence that he saw as the ultimate purpose of, if you will, of the entire evolutionary journey. And I wanted to just in just 1 or 2 more minutes call in this effort, this convergence of Peace Week, because it is part of the Unity Earth family, and it is very much rooted in Teilhard's vision. Ben Bowler, who is executive director of Unity Earth, which is the organizing body for this, and I say body because when you go to the website for Unity Earth, you will see right up front, the first thing it says is that Unity Earth is a network of organizations. So it's looking for, it's that space for convergence and coming together. And I was blessed 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now, when World Unity Week launched in June of 2020. And just like today, I, as a Montessorian and person inspired by Teilhard and the things that I bring to the table, was invited very warmly to step forward and offer something during World Unity Week in one of the many convergence rooms. And it's all volunteer, it's all free to the world, as Ben says. And I cannot tell that entire story right now. I would love to, but it's absolutely inspired directly by Teilhard. Devotion to Teilhard's work runs deep in Ben's family, his father, from his father on, his father who's a geologist in Australia. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton. I want to just so blessed to introduce my dear friend, Viola Olson, who I have not met in person yet, but one day, she in Oregon, I in Texas, one day that can still happen. And Viola has a lovely bio here that I'm going to just read out a bit to you. Viola Olson completed a master's degree in adult education and leadership at Oregon State in 2001, with a specialty in the theory and practice of what Fritjof Capra calls the systems view of life. Her mentors taught that the education system, which is the source of most issues related to climate change, sorry, I read that wrong. Her mentors taught that the education system is the source of most issues related to climate change. So she developed a series of workshops for community college teachers based on Capra's systems. Oregon teachers were now being introduced to eco-literacy. Since retiring from her teaching position at Southern Oregon University in 2018 at the age of 77, Viola created and continues to maintain an online resource center for teachers of earth science based on research that reveals Earth as a living organism, interconnected with all of life in a symbiotic, harmonic relationship. In addition, she fosters intergenerational communication, facilitates conferences using emergent dialogue, and follows Thomas Berry's fourfold wisdom path to live at the edge of chaos, where creativity flourishes. She recently completed the Deep Time Network's leadership course and continues her online studies across a broad spectrum of interests. Welcome, Viola.
Oh, wow, Annie. What can I say? Well, when Annie invited me to participate here, I had no idea what I was going to do. I just thought, okay, well, I'll show up and see what emerges, since I'm one of those hooked on emergence, whatever happens, happens. So I prepared this long talk based on that article that we put on the chat. I think that we put it on the chat, and it's the one by Chalmers, where he's talking about all of the perils and whatever it is that's happening in the world today. And it's a very, very good article. But he goes into everything that Teilhard was saying 60 some years ago when he wrote a little book that I want to talk about today, since and by the way, this little book called Building the Earth was shown to me by Annie herself several years ago. And after that, this little book has become a sort of a guide for me, because he was saying things back then that no one was listening to. And if they were, I don't know. I mean, it's just, in other words, he was not well read until now. People are coming back to Teilhard's writings and respecting him as a scientist and as a mystic, because he is so prophetic. I want to say one thing about Teilhard, that he is what is called a polymath, which is a person that is so vast and so, what's the word? I mean, he's such a multifaceted human being. And he is, now I think today we call that the Renaissance man. Has nothing to do with the Renaissance, I don't think, but it's just someone that is very well aware and knowing about so many things. But he is also a prophet in so many ways. So I'm not going to do the talk I had planned to do on the article, as I'll just mention that it's a very good article. And if it's in the chat, that I welcome you to read it, so that you can see that what Teilhard had to say then this writer has to say now, 60 some years later, finally, same thing. So what I'm going to say about this little book, Building the Earth, in poetic form, written in poetic form, is what he's saying now, finally. So I'm going to spend a little time and go slowly, not rush, because I was rushing a lot to get all of that other stuff, and just start by showing you the frontispiece. Can you see that? I think, can everybody see that? So I'll read it for you. It says, "The age of nations is past. The task before us now, if we would not perish," all right, "if we would not perish, is to build the earth." And he signs it with his beautiful signature. And I mean, I cry when I read that. I mean, I get very emotional, so please forgive me if I fall into tears. So, so let me just start by showing you some pictures of this little book, and then I'll tell you all about it. You see all of these mandalas, and you see the star shapes. This was illustrated by a person who took the poem, which is really basically a poem, and illustrated it. So let me see. Where should I begin? Oh, here's another mandala and another star. Teilhard, believe it or not, was a teacher of physics back, I guess, in the early years in the Jesuit. Do you know, Annie, when he was teaching physics? He was just sort of told to teach physics back in the day before quantum physics. But now, the Teilhard of now, when he wrote this later, he already knew about quantum physics, and he knew all about, well, all kinds of things, as you shall see. So let me just start by reading to you the titles of the chapters in this little book. It's a very little book. You can read it in an hour. See, it's very thin, but very beautiful. So he says, first, chapter 1, we must save mankind. That was his task, right? To save mankind, and that's our task. I would now say save all species. Then he talks about the spirit of the earth. The earth is an organism, right? That's the spirit of the earth. And then he talks in chapter 3 of human energy, which he calls love. Human energy. In fact, he has a book on human energy, and it's about love. He took all, and he knew about all the little particles, and I mean, he knew about the atom, and now he knew about how all of that is energy. I guess we call it entropy, and how the universe is expanding. And I mean, he knew all of that before James Webb and anybody told us that this was, or the one before, the Hubble. He knew all of that in his mind. I don't know how he knew it, but he did. So then the last one is on thoughts on progress. See, so that he was very interested in the future. He was interested in progress, interested, in fact, he predicted the internet with the Noosphere. So that just goes to show you how vast it was. So let's see. So we must save mankind. And I'm just going to read a few, like an introductory paragraph from each chapter, so you can get an idea of what he is saying. He starts out by saying, there is now incontrovertible evidence that mankind has just entered upon the greatest period of change the world has ever known. That's what he said then. the greatest period of change the world has ever known. The ills from which we are suffering have had their seat in the very foundations of human thought. But today, something is happening to the whole structure of human consciousness. A fresh kind of life is starting. I mean, so right away, you know, he brings you into this hope that something new is starting, and it's a fresh kind. It's like a rebirth, a regeneration. I guess it's called regeneration. So in the face of such an upheaval, actually shaken by it, no one can remain indifferent, right? I mean, once we know, how can we be so apathetic and indifferent and in denial? And then he continues, swept along by the tide of affairs, what can we do? What can we do to see clearly and to act decisively? And that is my question. That's been my question for years. So what are we supposed to do now? Here, all of this is happening, and we have all of these crises. We have COVID. We have, of course, the climate emergency, and all this polarity and division and governance. What kind of governing leadership do we have? And who is following, and why is it this way, and why can't we learn from my mistakes? Those are my questions, right, that I'm hoping as I read through this that he will answer. And but he asks more questions. So actually just kind of be swept along by the tide of affairs, you know, just kind of go along, read as you know, absorb what is happening, and then keep moving forward towards the future. It's always with Teilhard about the future, you know. So then he says, no matter what reactions we may have to current events, right? I mean, that's it. We are all reacting with some sense of trepidation, I guess, right now. But he says, no matter what reactions we may have to current events, we ought first to reaffirm a robust faith in the destiny of man. Isn't that beautiful? A robust faith. I mean, he had so much faith in humankind. So even if that faith is already there, it must be fortified. I mean, you know, don't just sit around and have faith in it, but do something about it, you know. It is too easy to find an excuse for inaction by pleading the decadence of civilization. So that article that is in the chat for you to read, he talks about the collapse of civilization. And then he goes into the reasons and what we can do about it. So he doesn't, actually he's saying, he doesn't say collapsed civilization. He says, basically it is collapsing. It's in the process of collapsing, so that we can do something about it while it's in the process of collapsing, so that you don't just sit there and say, oh, well, that's it, you know, we're done. There's nothing else to do but just sit back and wait and do nothing. So, and that's what's scary, you know, the fact that a lot of people are feeling that, oh, what's the point, you know, since it's already gone down. According to some of the gloom and doom people, it's already gone down for good. So maybe just a little bit more here. This defeatism, yeah, that's that word, defeatism, that sense of, okay, we're done, forget it, there's nothing we can do, so just what? Give it up and sit back and do nothing. So that defeatism, whether it be innate or acquired or a mere affectation, seems to me the besetting temptation of our time. I mean, Isn't that what we're feeling right now? So defeatism is invariably unhealthy and impotent. Can we also prove that it is unjustified? And he says, I think so. And then he just goes on. And that's just for starters, what he says in chapter 1. And then he just moves over with this idea of the grand design and then conflicting ideologies and social aspirations that men cannot attain, and democracy. He goes into democracy by giving. So the meaning of democracy. And then he talks about the different, communism, fascism, and democracy, because in that day, that's what we were faced with. And I hate to say this, but isn't that what we're faced with right now again? And we didn't learn from our mistakes, and I don't understand why do we not learn from our mistakes? Well, okay, so let me just, I can't read the whole book, I'd have to spend a whole hour, but
Hey, Viola.
yes.
Yeah, can you wrap up? And I'd love for us to hear from Matt also real quick before we,
see, my time is up
10
already.
minutes or so. Yeah, that'd be
Okay,
lovely.
sure.
Yeah, our
Thank
time is so short. Thank you so much, Viola.
Okay.
So Matt Landry is here, and Matt holds a degree in physics and was active in simulator engineering for 51 years in advanced aircraft research until his retirement in 2013. For many years, he lectured on Teilhard topics and was involved in adult programming in the Catholic Church. Today, Matt Landry is author of 2 blogs about Teilhard de Chardin, The Phenomenon of Love and the Secular Side of God. And he recently submitted an article for the Teilhard Studies series. Matt also serves on the board of the American Teilhard Association and is an admin for the Teilhard group on Facebook. Welcome, Matt.
Well, thank you, Annie. One of the real pleasures of being involved with the Teilhard group is that we have met some wonderful people like Annie and Viola, and gotten to know them and recognize the fresh insights that we have. In their introductions, they touched on a couple of things that I'll be touching on as well, which I think are germane to the whole idea of a world level of some kind of a world level of congeniality that results in what we call generally peace. Annie talked about the something that Teilhard was very concerned about, which was the compression of humanity. We live on a sphere, people are reproducing. As we reach the median of this sphere, we run out of land to move into, conflicts start, we compress, and all kind of negative things emerge from this. And we've seen it with communism, fascism, slavery, and all of the ills of mankind. Teilhard points out, as we will address, the need for something that pushes back on this, some way that the human spirit can continue to flourish and evolve in spite of the fact that we're being crowded in on one another. Viola talks about the fact that if we don't have, that Teilhard points out, if we don't have a robust faith in the future, if we don't believe that somehow these things that are carrying us into ever deeper and perilous waters are by the same token lifting us at the same time. Those are almost orthogonal concepts. And Teilhard's very integrated and universal picture of reality can help us to see these things in a new context, which helps us personally to overcome our fear of the future and at the same time collaborate with others to build that same future. So Teilhard's evolutionary insight was very unusual for the time, because we were coming off of the Age of Enlightenment. a general decline of religious belief across the globe. And along comes Teilhard and says, these things are not orthogonal. Science and religion are really two aspects of the same thing. And he bases his insights on the fact that the universe is evolving. Science quantifies universal evolution as an increase in complexity over time. And we can see that. Science basically shows how quarks can become atoms, and atoms can become electrons. Atoms can become molecules, which can become very complex molecules like DNA, which grow into cells, which grow into neurons, and so on and so on, all the way up to, at least on this planet, the human person. Nothing in this process happens without somehow the joining of the individuals to produce a new individual, which is more complex than its parents. So this happens, Teilhard points out, in 3 stages. We have the stage of material evolution, where we grow from quarks to very complex molecules. We have the biological stage in which those molecules turn into cells, and the cells become neurons, and neurons become brains, and we get eventually the 3rd stage, which is the human. And the stage isn't necessarily human evolution, it's the evolution of the culture of humans. That group of rules and guidelines that they use to make sense of their lives and make sense of their relationships. This isn't something that is unique to religion. It's not. In fact, many religious people would deny that it even occurs, as do the scientists. But then you've got atheists such as Richard Dawkins that basically says same thing. We have these 3 stages. He even goes into a detailed analysis of how cultural evolution mirrors biological evolution. Natural selection happens to some extent in the ideas of humans. These are all very Teilhardian concepts that permit us to stand back and look at the universe in this, through this evolutionary lens of evolution that he offers. The other thing that he points out is that this complexity that rises, at least on this planet, is also accompanied by a rise in awareness. Consciousness isn't something which suddenly burst into reality with humans. Consciousness is actually no more than, according to some sciences, the information that enables the bits of matter to come together and produce bits of matter which are more complex. There's this idea that perhaps in all matter is some level of software that inhabits the hardware of matter and guides it into the kinds of unions which result in more complexity. And the human person is simply the latest manifestation, at least on this planet, of this complexification, as Teilhard points out. And Teilhard goes a little deeper. He looks at the end stage of evolution, at least so far, not the end of time, but where it's gotten to with the human being, and says, this agency by which matter can come together and become more complex, he refers to it as the Christic. Now, the term Christ, of course, arises in the New Testament with Paul for the first time. Paul distinguishes the Christ from the person of Jesus by talking about the presence of this agency in all time. So Teilhard sees the Christic is the basis of evolution that eventually turns into or results in the person. And Jesus is the epitome in our religion of Christianity, the most perfect manifestation of what can happen as this agency takes charge of matter and turns it into spirit. Now, so it's a thread of universal energy that results in the person. Now we get into John a little later in the New Testament, and he goes into a little bit more detail, but he uses the quote, or provides us with a quote that has stimulated Christianity for its whole life. And he says, God is love, and he who abides in love abides in God, and God in him. In that very, very simple expression of ontology, John expresses the idea of immanence and transcendence all in a single sentence. So if we look at the significance of this secular definition, a succinct definition of God, we can see that the evolution, the energy of evolution of the universe is now seen to be active in every human. This energy manifests itself, as Viola says, in terms of what we call love. So love is really the energy of the universe personified in the human person. It's different in the way it works, but it's really an echo of the same kind of causality by which the quark becomes an atom. It also points to a difference in the way that the energy of the universe manifests itself in the human versus its predecessor in material evolution. To Teilhard, love is that which joins us in a way that we actualize our potential. In previous material evolution, the atom itself doesn't change as it joins in to become molecules. In the human person, we change when we unite in the name of love. So Teilhard's quote here is very succinct and very to the point of how it is that we can move our evolution forward. And he says, fuller being comes from closer union, and closer union comes from fuller being. Not only are we enriched by the love that we share with others, they are enriched, and their enrichment turns around and evidences itself in the capacity for a fuller relationship with us. So this spiral of evolution rises through the human, just as it did through its predecessors, in a new way. Humans become more enriched by the unions that they manage. So the key here is to recognize how this idea of love is really divine presence in the human person. Religion presents itself as a guide to the recognition of this inner spark in all of us. What does it mean to be human? Religion asks. And how do we take fuller possession of ourselves? As we grow and become more human, more persons, more individualized at the same time that we become more unified with others, how is it that we grow? How is it that we become more? And I'll give you a good quote here from Teilhard. He says, I doubt that whether there is a more decisive moment for a thinking being than when the scales fall from his eyes and he discovers that he is not an isolated unit lost in the cosmic solitudes, and realizes that a universal will to live converges and is harmonized in him. Blondel, Maurice Blondel, who preceded Teilhard in history, makes a little bit different point. He says, Christianity, underlying statement of Christianity is that God is on our side. Teilhard elaborates this and says, God's not on our side as a separate agent. He is on our side because he is an agency of our growth. So the danger comes when we don't recognize this energy of evolution in our personal lives and in our species. Religion sometimes can help with this. In fact, it often does, but it also can work the other way around. You hear a lot of people talking about the fact that a lot of Christians believe, interpreting the Bible literally, that humans have fallen from some state of perfection and are doomed to, without the intervention of God from the outside, to eventually be lost. or condemned is the word they use. Luther, for example, who of course was very brilliant in other ways, considered the human person to be a pile of excrement. He uses a more explicit word than excrement, which I won't use here. A pile of excrement requiring the covering of Christ. So it just to many in our Western religion, human beings are kind of doomed. They don't have the wherewithal to quote save unquote themselves. So we're sort of doomed unless God can intervene. And in some parts of religion, of course, this is sort of requires God to come as an external militant force to override the sinful nature of man. So religion doesn't necessarily help us to recognize that God is already inside of us. God isn't something that we seek from the outside. We don't seek a relationship with him. What we really seek is the awareness of the life of God, the divine inside of us.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's gorgeous, Matt. I love that.
Am I going on too long?
I know our time is so short here today. I would like to open it in case there's someone that might have a comment or question. We can take just a few more minutes. But just wanted to give that opportunity for someone else's voice to come in.
There was a question in the chat just about which are, other pioneers. And Viola, I know this was directed to you, other pioneers like Teilhard. And I know I said Thomas Berry, Brian Swim, Barbara Marx Hubbard. Add to that, please. My list is not extensive.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, did you want me to respond to that?
Yeah, well, anyone
Yes.
can, yeah.
Yeah, the pioneer, the Thomas Berry, also a prophetic human being, and Barbara Marx Hubbard. It's all about, okay, Thomas Berry says the Ecozoic era, that we are getting into it, and that's going to be the next step for us to that the next era, big era. And of course, Barbara Marx Hubbard is all about the future. And she, in fact, there's a library, the Teilhardian library, that maybe we could put in the chat for people, Annie. And it where he he talks about all of these things and explains them all, that way back from the human phenomenon, up to what's happening now. So it's called organism.earth. Yeah, that's the name of the site where you can find out all about this idea of this connectedness, organism.
Great. Matt, did you?
So,
yeah, great. Thank you. Matt, did you have anyone to add to that?
Oh yeah, there are several contemporary theologians that follow Teilhard very closely. One is Richard Rohr, who I really recommend to anybody that is seeking a deeper relationship with God, at the same time is interested in how Teilhard kind of instructs us to do that. There's an author by the name of John
Haught.
Fell out of my head. John Hay.
Haught. H-A-U-G-H-T.
Right.
And I really like him because he blends the idea of not for a truth to be relevant to human life, it's got to somehow reflect what science is also finding. And so therefore science can be used as a filtering mechanism to help religion divest itself of the baggage that we've placed on it over the several thousand years that it's been floating around. Ilia Delio is also a good example of a Teilhardian writer. Cynthia
Worship. Yep.
is also, I think she's very insightful. She's an Episcopal priest who uses Teilhard's ideas to help us. So there's a lot of the existential theologians that are out there that are recognizing that God should not be seen as an anthropomorphic person who is standing outside of reality and tinkering with it, but as a unique agency built into the evolution of the universe itself.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Linda, did you have a question or a comment real quickly before we close
hello. I just bring up process theology.
We have someone else. Yeah, Matthew.
Are you there?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Process theology, remember with Cobb, and he was influenced by Chardin too. And remember Chardin is confronted with the science, as Matt and Viola had said. He's confronted with this new science, and the Catholic Church is resisting this because it's really upset. It upsets their view of the divine reality as a stagnant thing, as a concept. And Teilhard also is influenced by Hegel. So it's we're in evolving consciousness of humanity, and and this is part of the divine process itself. So God is in the process of becoming, which the Sufis actually say as well, and that's how Chardin even sees Christ as we're all the Christ, becoming Christ, becoming the God conscious and loving and everything else in the world that we want, So we are in this process. We know we're in the process. Everybody here knows we're in this process of awakening and manifesting the best we are. So we already find it within ourselves. And this is God. God is it coming out, And so there doesn't have to be any division between science in theory and religion in theory, because if you accept that science is talking about an evolution and movement and change, and religion can accept that as that God manifesting in the world is a process. Makes sense.
Thank you, Martin. Right, great. Linda, did you have a quick comment?
Well, it's probably not quick. It's an observation, and maybe we could look at it further.
Love to hear from you.
So I live with the human energy equals love, and I love that. But now the next thing he talked about, a fresh kind of life is starting. And so with that, I'm very curious, and I listen to what's happening. And even just yesterday, I heard talking about deep fake. And there's a lot of artificial intelligence. So if we're getting all of this coming down, it's here to help us move into this place of this fresh start. But I begin to look at how can humans forage through all of the stuff that is coming down as fake, as we, with our technology, are able to create things that aren't so. It's all part of the creative process. And so I'm leaving us with a curious, what is happening now in our lives today, just like I'm heard yesterday on the radio, currently, this is what's going on. And it has to be what is shaping the fresh kind of life is starting. So I would love very much to have a whole ongoing conversation about looking at what's happening really right now and how is that shaping this fresh start.
Let's do it, Linda. Yeah, I'll get in touch. Yeah.
We need to have a part 2 here at some stage. This is really great. Thank you, Linda.
So much. Thank you,
We-
Hasina. Go ahead,
thank you.
Hasina.
I just wanted to say, isn't it the best way to end with a question that actually takes us into more thinking and feeling and so on? But I just quickly wanted to say, thank you so much, Annie. Thank you for being able to liaise with you and organizing this. It was beautiful. Thank you, Viola. Thank you, Matt. All of you for just being here, and what an interesting discussion. And it was so current and bringing today's world in, and we need that to heal to our next evolutionary level. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hasina. Many blessings.
Okay, we'll now actually just go into our next session. Anyone who wants a restroom break, there will be one. So we'll just take 2 minutes. And we're going to have a wonderful discussion with 2 amazing young people who are, one's just out of school, and the other one is still, I think